Hi. How are you? I'm Linda Rosner. I'm the Managing Director of Artisans PR, and welcome to the 15th Annual Pre-NAB Editors Lounge. To my right are the esteemed panelists, and I'll have them each introduce themselves to you.
Hi, my name is Michael Kammes. I'm the Director of Technology here at Keycode Media, and I also run a web series called 5 Things.
I'm Kathryn Himoff. I am a picture editor. I've been editing for 25 years. Everything, pilots, features, independent movies, documentaries, starting with things like The Office and Ugly Betty, Man in the High Castle. I'm doing a new pilot for ABC now called The Finest. Edited movies like Pollock, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and worked as an additional editor on Guardians of the Galaxy.
My name is Mark Raudonis. I'm head of post-production at Bunim Productions, which is a reality TV production company. We kind of invented the genre with MTV's Real World back in 1992. Yes, I'm that old. Started out life as an editor, but now my focus is more in managing the team and a lot of the technology, which is why I end up talking to this guy.
Okay, my name is Terence Curren. I'm the president of a company called AlphaDogs in Burbank. I am an editor and a colorist and prognosticator of the future of things. As an owner of a company, I have to try to always be looking forward and how do we make things work. And at AlphaDogs, we focus on the talent as opposed to the tech. But I have to always look at how, what's the most economical way we can achieve the end result without sacrificing quality. So it's, constantly evolving now.
Thank you very much. So, audience participation, the first question, who is all here attending NAB? Wow.
You're not going this year either?
Oh, I'm going.
Okay. And who, I guess the rest of you are not, but raise your hands. All right, so first of all, is NAB, is it viable?
Well, I'll answer because I know my esteemed colleague at the end has basically said, whatever. I think it is for many reasons. One of the things I like to call it is the annual business card exchange, because you get to see where everyone you saw last year, who they're working for now. But I think those who want to network, there are a ton of parties. And I'm not just talking about the ones that Broadcast Beat puts out on their website, right? There's a lot of parties that aren't known real well, but if you know someone, you can go, have a few drinks, and you can network. In terms of the NAB portion, you're just gonna get technology through the floodgates, and it's gonna open your mind to all the things you may not have thought of, and different ways of creating with tools you've never heard of before. So I think it's completely viable.
Huh.
Who knew?
Well, I guess you've just sold me. I never saw any point to it. But then again, I've never been, so maybe I should go, and then maybe I would find that it would be something that would inspire me.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you. Has anyone here never gone to NAB? You're either lucky or you're...
I've never gone to NAB. I've never gone to film school. I don't know. Maybe this is all a mistake.
The one caveat is that it's not inexpensive. I'm very fortunate that Keycode flies me out and puts me up, and I can't beat that. So you do need several $1,000s to make NAB worthwhile.
So how would it be useful for an editor?
I'll take that.
Oh yeah, please.
Number one, all of the companies, that's Avid, Apple maybe in the background. Excuse me, Adobe, they're all there, they're all showing the software. There's great demos by really world-renowned artists. So as an editor, you can see people demonstrating the software at the highest level. So it's a great place to get ideas, it's a great place to learn what's new, what's coming up. For that, it's worthwhile.
But if I'm using the Avid, I'm not thinking about switching to Premiere.
Maybe there's other aspects, other programs that you didn't even think about, or other pieces of technology that you go, this might be an interesting...
Plugins.
Not even, just different tools, that this might be an interesting addition to my tool set that you didn't know about. But to take the opposing point of view.
Well, I went to NAB for over 25 years, and about 3 years ago, I stopped going.
There was this little incident.
You said you'd never tell.
You weren't invited back.
A couple things changed. One is, because I used to go for, some of the networking, but mostly for the technology, because you would get to see things that, behind the scenes that are coming up that you otherwise would not have been able to, see or know what's coming. You might buy gear that is going to be replaced in another 3 months. By going there, you get the back room stuff and find out what's happening. That doesn't really count anymore because with the internet, you know kind of what's going on with everything ahead of time now. It used to be every company would have all these great all their new features and everything would be announced at NAB. So prior to that, you had no idea what was coming. But now as soon as they come up with a feature, you hear about it. It's not, we got to wait till this one time of year. The only thing I miss about NAB is the people that I know from around the world that I would meet when I was up there. But that was a small part of it, and you have to suffer through Vegas to get to that point, which is, but...
The taxi line at the airport.
Yeah, so the other thing that's happened is I go to this thing called the HPA Tech Retreat now, which is out in Indian Wells, out in the desert, and it's a month ago, so it comes basically about a month and a half before NAB every year. And it's more like the TED Talks of our industry, so you get all kinds of different people talking about different things, and it's what's gonna be happening, not... NAB's kind of become, well, here, come buy this. This is what it's really kind of a show floor now. And the HPA Tech Retreat has become that place you go to get where are we going in the future. For instance, I saw HDR demoed there by Dolby, introduced there by Vince. I don't know where he's sitting around here. I think it was like 5 years ago or something, which is now, it is now something. But I saw it back then, I'm going, this is gonna be the thing we need. Not 4K, we need HDR, so.
And I think the other angle is that, not just for us, but a lot of manufacturers have realized that there's the NAB white noise, which is, sure, we'll make an announcement on Monday of what we're releasing, and you know what, you have to compete with 2,000 or 3,000 other manufacturers. So you get companies like Blackmagic, right, who made announcements a month and a half, 2 months ago. You have companies like Apple who just said, screw off, we're just gonna do our own announcements. And then you get into the companies like Adobe and other subscription-based companies that don't have to rely on NAB. They have to do it every quarter because that's what the subscription amounts to in terms of their shareholders. So I think there's a lot of companies that are also saying, you know what, maybe we're not going to do it or put as much money into it because we can reach more people over the internet.
It is an opportunity, though, for new companies and established companies to really give a full demo of what they have to show. And it is a conglomeration of those people in those industries and those professionals. But what, Michael and Mark, what do you hope to see? What do you expect to see this year at NAB?
Artificial intelligence, AI. You've heard about it. You've heard about it in other areas, other industries. I think this is the year that you're going to start seeing people make promises. You may not see actual products, but you're going to start seeing promises of we're going to do this with AI. We're going to do that with AI. It may be a couple years before you actually can use it in your edit bay, but I think you're going to start seeing announcements of it. On the NAB webpage right now, they are announcing a whole sort of AI experiential something or other. I don't know what that means. But what it does mean is that there's definitely going to be a focus on that.
Well, this year I'm actually being a little bit more aggressive on that because I think last year there were a lot of promises, whether it was Telestream had the big announcement about speech to text and doing that in the cloud, and a lot of asset management systems have said, well, we're going to take your dailies and spit proxies up to the cloud and transcribe them and do facial recognition and pattern recognition. And the whole thing about NAB is show it at NAB, ship at IBC, right? And that doesn't always happen. And so this year I'm actually going to be going to those manufacturers and say,
where is it?
Where is it? The other thing I'm looking into, I know last year I said what I was looking for was a good asset management system, and I think I put everyone to sleep when I brought that up.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that.
Exactly. Is truly remote editing. And I can see the eye roll.
I love remote editing.
How can we, and I'm not talking about, hey, put it on a flash drive or put it in Dropbox and edit remotely. No, I'm not talking about hack remote editing. I'm talking about streamable proxies. I'm talking about someone in LA saying, you know what, I have an editor that's out in Boston and I want them to cut and I want to keep the footage here. I don't want to have to stick it on a drive and ship it over there. I don't have to pay for an Aspera link with a fat pipe up to the internet. I want true true collaboration between my creatives around the world, or at least around the continent, in semi-real time. And we've been promised it by a company called Avid. Adobe was doing it and then killed it and now has something different. I'm really looking for solutions that can fill that gap, that will not require a facility to invest in it to get it to work.
Now tell me, Kathryn, as an editor, and Terry, as editors, talk to me about remote editing. But first I'm gonna go with Kathryn, because I know, Terry, you have a lot to say on that.
I love the shitty kind of remote editing. I guess I must be kind of old school, right? Because I show up and there's the Avid there and I'm satisfied with it, you know? And sometimes I will take a scene or two home and just edit it on my laptop. Sometimes if I, in a snap, need to go to a location, I can bring my laptop with me and the entire show or film that I'm working on a, you know, on a little drive that's, you know, fits in my purse. And this is really kind of fluid and wonderful for me. And very liberating. I kind of really dig it. So,
but that's not what he's talking about.
But he's talking about something else entirely. Yeah. And this, I think, would be incredibly useful. I mean, incredibly, phenomenally useful. Obviously, it would really speed up the workflow in the cutting room. Mm-hmm. Very often, and recently I've been doing it through Slack, which is like a live texting way that you can organize an office. I am communicating frequently with the filmmaker when they're on the set. You know, they'll send me a picture of something, or we'll be having a dialogue about it. And if we have, you know, fluid dailies, it means that as things are being shot, I would be able to look at them in, you know, moments later and be able to have a dialogue. And that really makes it puts the whole team together as part of the process, which is good. The more the team is like a family, the better the outcome.
Sony is, I don't know if they're announcing, but I'm going to steal their thunder. They have something called, a phrase called, post begins at the camera. And what that means is by moving as much of post as possible, as close to the camera, a lot of the things that you're talking about become possible. Any basketball fans out there? Yeah, no, oh, big crowd. Anyway, you've heard of LeVar Ball and his three sons, Lonzo, Melo, and Jello. Well, Lonzo plays for the Lakers. Jello was on UCLA, and he was the guy who got accused of shoplifting in China. So his father, after he got basically excused from UCLA, his father said, I know, we're going to move to Lithuania, and you're going to play semi-professional ball in Lithuania. Well, we happen to be doing a show about them called Ball in the Family on Facebook. And so now the show started, it was all LA-based, but now we're trying to cover 10 time zones. So we have a crew in Lithuania and a crew here, and talk about post starting at the camera. Sony has a product called the CBK10 or something like that, but basically takes proxies right out, it takes the camera, full res video out of the camera, turns it into proxies and sends it immediately up to their cloud-based thing. So we now, because of the time zone difference, they shoot 10 a.m. in Lithuania, and by the end of the day, 10 a.m. Los Angeles time, we're now able to start editing. So that's compressing the time that it used to take, anywhere from 5 to 7 days to get that stuff to us. So that's a huge improvement, and that impacts post because now we have more time to do what we're trying to do.
So Terry, what's your opinion on remote editing? We're
editors, so we're basically introverts. We would prefer to work in a room by ourselves. I mean, in a perfect world.
Speak for yourself.
Well, the problem is that if you're given the choice to work at home, and everybody else gets used to you never being there, so there's no personal interaction, at some point in time, it doesn't matter where you are, and then it goes to who's the cheapest editor they can find, and it won't be somebody in the US at that point. So that's the long-term concern. And
gosh, I disagree with that.
Okay.
On a couple of levels. So I'm going to take you on.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing is, I think that actually having the remote editing makes you more integrated into the process more immediately. And in addition, I think that editing is a fine art, and I think that when a director chooses their editor, who is their partner in the making of a film or television show or whatever, I mean, in certain circumstances, I think, yeah, I guess it's, you know, hire your cheapest person, but it's such a very, very important role. The interchange and the dynamic and the stamp that you leave on whatever it is that you're editing is so strong that I don't think that can ever go away. That's not going to go away just because you're working remotely.
So how do you explain the VFX industry and what's happened with them?
In what way?
What do you mean?
It's the same thing. They're
It's
gone.
the same thing. And you could have made that argument for every VFX artist, but that went global and that chased the lowest common denominator in labor.
I think it depends on what projects you're working on.
Right. Yeah,
Okay, so I think
yes.
that's what it is. I think
Yes.
it's definitely project related, because certainly on a film like Guardians of the Galaxy or Man on the High Castle or whatever, you know, the people that you choose for your visual effects artists are very, very key. And editors are actually included in that process of looking at reels and, you know, helping to guide, although we do not make the decisions.
The place that you're coming from
is a different place.
Yeah, in a higher budget echelon world,
Yeah.
it's a different thing.
Yes, yes.
The amount of total video product that, you know, that high-end Hollywood puts out versus all of the video product
Right.
out there
That's
is
correct.
very small. So
That's correct.
I'm talking about on a large scale. If you're not working on a high-end film, you're just, you know, maybe you're lucky you got on a $100,000 movie, right?
Sure.
And you're working on.
Sure.
Yeah, those people are going to go, well, there's this guy in India.
And even if there was a guy wherever or a girl wherever, you would still want to evaluate the other things that they've done to make sure that, that they're going to bring in the best quality for your dollar.
First of all, they produce more film than everybody else right
Yes,
now.
they do. And
I think they have a couple people can edit over there, and they're investing a lot of money into training people into that industry. That's what you're competing
Well, I
against.
think that's just in the category of churning out product, which
Yes.
is kind of a different thing than.
Michael, you were going to say something?
Well, I'm looking at it from more of a business perspective, which is if we look at corporate America, who have multiple branches around the country, around the world. Well, it used to be you'd have to have the marketing person in that location do that editing, right, or do that creative stuff. Now, that can be all done from one location, because the media can be streamed from one location to another, right? We talk about students who used to only be able to work with folks who were local or who went to their college or went to their high school. Now you can collaborate with someone who's overseas. So I'm looking at it from more that perspective than I'm looking at it than our jobs being gone to the lowest common denominator. But I completely understand your spot.
He's been complaining the sky's falling for years, so.
We don't call them Chicken Little for nothing.
If you look at the same level of editor, it hasn't really, what you pay them hasn't changed that much from the early 90s. But
Actually, it's gotten less. I make
Yes.
less now
Yeah.
than I made 10 years ago.
And that's not accounting
Doing
for
the same
inflation,
job.
which also eats away at that.
Yeah,
So.
that is an interesting.
So we're going to change a little bit here and just go with our little thumbs up, thumbs down piece on the different formats. So give me a thumbs up, thumbs down on 3D. Up?
I don't know.
Down?
For those of you who've been coming a long time, I've always been doing that on 3D. Some other ones have changed.
I'm with you. Okay, 4K.
Yes.
Everything's all 4K
Yeah, everything
all
is
the time.
4K. Yeah, yeah.
Or, hang on,
Or
I'm sorry,
8K.
UHD for you engineers out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. For acquisition, distribution, which one?
I'm thinking for
Both.
both, yeah. All right.
Terry?
Acquisition, distribution.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, 8K.
I want to watch this.
I don't know. Guardians was 8K, you know.
Was it really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you're what?
Again, acquisition, fine, because then you can reframe and you know, put
Sure.
some more people out of work.
So when I started editing, I was editing on film, and so what the cinematographers shot was sacrosanct. I mean,
Yes,
it was
exactly.
chosen. It was
Yes.
intentional. You didn't change it. I was going to use it. So then, so I'm only working. You know, I did some television pilots, and then I'm only working movies, and then suddenly I'm on a television series. And so I'm putting it together, you know, the way I would, honoring everything that was shot. And then the showrunner comes in and goes, what are you doing here? Like, this needs to be a close-up. This needs to be a two-shot. You need to fix this the way you think it should be, and I'm going to leave and come back. And I'm like, seriously? So he left, and I took like a really deep breath, and I don't know what else, and I looked at the material, and I thought, okay, how would I shoot this if I had a camera? And I thought, this is bizarre. And then I went through the show, and 4K, and I literally took masters and made them into two shots, and like radically changed the way the shots looked, even the angles of the shots, and I felt a little creepy. But showrunner came back and he's like, yeah. So that was like my first experience with that. I never even thought that I needed to think that way. And now I realize pretty much on every job I do, they expect me as an editor to think that way.
Think as a cinematographer.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Jack Tucker's here somewhere. He's famous for a quote where he said the edit is the final rewrite of the script.
Oh, that's your quote?
That's, yep. And that's always been true when the DPs would shoot what you wanted, et cetera. But now, as a colorist, I changed the entire feel
radically.
of scenes.
Oh, my.
Audio mixers, after Walter Merchant, puts in layers and layers and layers of stuff and builds out these huge sound designs, and that becomes now the standard.
Is the standard.
We're building more, and we can completely change what a scene is after the fact. So I have to amend you. It's now color and sound are the final rewrite of the script. Terence Curren, 2018.
Now, talking about standards, HDR.
A quick brief history of it. Okay, so Dolby.
What? High dynamic range.
Dolby, there's nobody from Dolby here, is there? Dolby's audio patents were kind of expiring, so they're looking for what can we do to get some more guaranteed income. And so they got into the video side, and they were developing monitors, and then they started thinking, well, why, all of our monitors now, at least a reference monitor, what we set to the standards by, television monitor, the brightest white on there is 100 nits, which is roughly 100 candles. But just say if you were looking at color bars on the monitor, the bright white would be 100 nits. That's your measurement. That's the top, okay? Dolby wanted to see how high could that go, and so they did this testing, and there weren't any monitors that could go much higher than that, so what they did is they got 2 laser projectors and aligned them perfectly on the back, doing rear projection, and then had people watch. And they found that the human eye could actually perceive from black all the way up to 20,000 nits, but that was kind of uncomfortable.
It's like looking at the sun.
Pretty much, yeah. And so they found 10,000 nits is the sweet spot. At this point, they have a monitor that nobody else can get, but they have a monitor that'll do 4,000 nits. The Sony reference monitor that you would buy for $35,000 to color correct HDR will only go to 1,000 nits, and that's if you just have a 1-inch square of white. Actually, if the full screen was white, it can only do, I think it's 187 nits. So we're kind of in the early stages of making this all work. But what the goal is, at least in Dolby's universe, they want to get up to that 10,000 nits. So when you are looking at a monitor, the brightest part on there is really bright. Even though you have 2 standards, all kinds of different implementations. So you can have the Sony monitor for reference that does 1,000 nits. You can have Dolby's monitor, which does 4,000 nits. The consumer sets that you're actually going to see it on are anywhere from 250 to like 650 nits. So it's kind of all over the place. And this year, when I went to the HPA Tech Retreat, one of my main goals was because all of the industry brains are there. So one of my main goals was to really go, okay, where are we at with this? How do we work with this? The more people I talk to, the more I realize it's all over the place. There's not really a kind of standardized alignment of where we're going to put things. Like if you put a title up, a white title, where do you put it? Do you put it at 1,000 nits? No, that would be horrible. Maybe 300 nits? Oh, we don't know. Maybe 700? Nobody knows exactly what to do and where to put things. So
now, Terry, but let me ask you, is it not true to everybody, actually, that Amazon Netflix.
Both require.
They are requiring,
Yes.
Hulu, they're
Well,
requiring HDR. They
On
not?
features, they are. On the shows, they're requiring.
Oh, so not on the TV shows.
Well, no.
Usually on the originals. Usually on the originals, they're specifying that. There's some leadway on stuff they're just licensing, but stuff that's coming out from Amazon or Netflix shows that they've commissioned, those traditionally are HDRI and HDR. They're acquiring in an HDR
That's
format.
what I'm telling you, they
and then
don't.
finish it.
They're not.
We do a show called Bill Nye Saves the World for Netflix. It's a studio-based show. I mean, it's not something that's going to, high dynamic range where you see the sky or explosions. It's a studio show. So, I mean, they're rational in the sense that that show is not going to benefit from HDR. So it's really kind of.
Right, if they think they can maximize the experience.
Yeah.
Well, and they're having you deliver the archive master in such a way that they can pull an HDR master from it later.
If they had to, yeah.
And that's part of the process.
I'll tell you, at least, from a key code perspective, where we're selling a lot of this gear, 2 or 3 times a week, I'm on con calls with facilities who said, we're bidding on a Netflix show because Netflix is flooding the Hollywood market with shows and movies. We have to be able to do HDR. We don't know what it is, but we have to be able to do HDR. And will my old Avid running 6.5 on a G5, will it do that? No. And it's really turned the industry in the past year and a half, 2 years. Everyone is scrambling to do it and not realizing that the financial money you have to invest to do these originals is just astronomical. I will say, from an engineering and kind of technological purist perspective, I welcome our Netflix overlords because they're the ones who are saying, you got to shoot with one of these cameras, you got to do this kind of workflow, instead of a lot of other outlets which are just deliver us something in this format. So I like that there's this push for quality on the front end to make sure everything at the tail end is great.
And I think also they
that.
want to make sure, they want to ensure the posterity of the things that they make.
Oh,
so
that's
they
evergreen.
Yeah.
Sure.
They want to make sure that they're ahead of the technological curve so that their product that they make has a long life.
Is it worth talking about UltraHD?
Are you talking about the expanded dynamic range?
Yeah, do you think is it happening?
So when you back to HDR, where it's the high dynamic range, so you've expanded out the amount of contrast ratio that you can have. But when you do that, you also widen out the amount of chroma or color that you can have in there, which is pretty awesome. And so, yeah, I think they call it different things. I mean, it's part of HDR, but it's also been called EDR.
It's a great tool for a filmmaker. I mean, it's a phenomenal tool for a filmmaker. I mean, think about
absolutely.
it.
The best description I can give you is where HDR really works is if you had a shot where you're in a room and there's a window behind and there's some cars outside in the sun. So normally everybody would look like, we look here, and then outside, if the sky was seen, it would be just white, which is not what your eye sees. What your eye sees is the sky is blue and the sparks, the sparkles on the car off the edge of the windshield, the glint and all that. Those add sharpness, basically, to the image. What high dynamic range allows you to do is maintain all of that stuff up there. Instead of crushing it all down, you can keep everything that's up there, what they call the speculars, which are the really high-end little sparky type things. And what it does is it makes the image really come alive. It's like you were there. And then, of course, like I said, there's the added color information, which means you can make colors really pop out. So it does look beautiful when it's done right.
But your eye probably has to get used to it the way our eyes had to get used to looking at digital images from film. There's like a transition that you need to make.
But you'll
probably
see it.
feels really fake.
If you go into a showroom that has monitors up, and some of them are actually hopefully set right and have good content, and if they're playing this, like Fry's or something, where they're playing the same footage in different monitors, if you'll walk in and you'll go, oh my God, that one really, it just grabs your attention. That's the HDR monitor. It's what, traditionally what they've done, if you buy a TV, there's always demo mode or store mode or whatever they are on there, which first thing you do is get off of that. But it's like really bright and everything's super colorful and all that, because that's how they put it on a showroom floor, because they know that's what grabs people's attention and sells them. HDR is just that plus. I mean, that's the best way I can put it.
I want to talk about a little different subject, if you're open to it, and that is security. There have been so many companies, large and small, that have been breached. And there's a lot of questions about who pays for the security, who's responsible, what do you do? Do you have any thoughts on that? Is this a topic you'd like to discuss?
The type of security that feature films deal with and studios deal with is not really a problem for us. However, having said that, we do Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and everyone remembers I Am Kate when Bruce turned to Kate. I think the going rate from the paparazzis for a picture prior to that coming out publicly was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So at that point, there was a lot of pressure to make sure that that stuff doesn't go out. So when we are doing something that's sensitive, we take extraordinary measures. But my heart goes out to the people at Sony or the audio finish, that was hit. It could happen to anyone and any of us, and it's gonna happen to more people. So you just.
Terry, does AlphaDogs take any precautions in that way?
Oh yeah, but I mean, and the funny thing is, if you look at the logs on your firewall, just it's all day long you're being nailed by bots. And the Larson thing, as I understand it, at least it's been publicly released, was completely accidental. It wasn't like somebody was going, hey, I want to go into Larson Sound and steal a movie. It was, they're out there and a bot found a hole and got in there, and then these guys went in and started poking around, and then they found, Orange is the New Black, and they took it, and that's how it happens a lot of the time. It's where our media is not directly connected to the internet anyway, so you have layers like that. But I don't know, everybody lives in dread of that. I mean, you talk about the reality and say it's okay, you want to watch it, but if you've got a competition series and somebody gets the end episode out there before the series is over, you kind of blew the rest of the series.
Terry brought up a good point, the kind of abstraction layer, which is any type of storage that may house important content, there is no way that has any link to the internet. So that means all your edit machines, I know you all like to download plugins and download images from Google Images, but no, that gets shut off. You don't have that access. And that if there is a review and approve process, then that goes to a different server, which goes up to a cloud-based server. And then you have to rely on the cloud. Is that cloud safe? Well, Amazon went down last year, right, for a little bit. But I guess you look at what's weaker. Is it your $1,500 firewall you have at your office, or is it what Amazon may have or what Frame.io may have on their system? So what's the lesser of two evils? And then you get to the point where we're rotoscoping out everyone in the picture except for certain parts just to check it, so if it leaks out, you won't be in trouble. Right? So unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet. There are some companies like Fortium where media is encrypted, where the media can only be played back on a system which has a decryption key. But then that lends itself to, everyone needs a decryption key, and that means all the creative tools you're using have to interop with that decryption key. And is that going to slow down the processing of the Boris effect that you're trying to render on your 8K material? Right? So there's all these other angles that come into play. So security right now is just be very, very careful, and that's about it.
How are you impacted by that as an editor? I mean, when you were talking about going home and editing at home, did they allow you to take footage of a movie
Guardians?
And go?
Yeah.
No.
I would think the MPAA might have
Not only
issues.
that, for Guardians, they were in my phone, in my iPad, and in my laptop. I had to.
Your security people.
The security people were, sorry, the security people co-opted all of my devices. And I had a special code sign in to my personal devices. And then there's the thing where I am as an editor perpetually posting cuts of scenes and change notes and whatever, and putting them online for producers to view. Pretty much always we're using pics for that. And I do always wonder how safe that is. But generally, it's very managed. Like only 5 people that are participating in a show are allowed to have a sign-in to pics at any given time.
They also have something called watermarking, personal watermarking.
Oh, everything is
but I know that it was your copy that went out to the world and not Terry's or Michael's. The problem with that is it takes more time and it's expensive as opposed to just doing it. But that's a way of at least closing,
just watermark on the app.
Closing the gate after the horse is left. You know who did it. It doesn't help you.
Yeah, it doesn't,
I think it's a trend that's going to be evolving. As with Fortium and cybersecurity, encryption is going to have to be an easier application for all, and I think they're working on that. Is it time to talk about AI?
Sure.
Sure.
I looked at AI and VR and 360, and I thought, this is going to be the fad with 3D, and boy, was I wrong. So I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm wondering what your experiences are with that, if you are beginning to edit those types of projects.
With regards to AI, artificial intelligence, or whatever you want to call it, I think that is creeping into all of the programs that we use. For example, DaVinci Resolve, they are using facial recognition to predefine the areas to color. And that's something that used to take even Terry hours to set up the areas, and now with snap of the fingers, and you can now have more time to experiment or to play with. And that's an example of facial recognition, AI, working its way into a program that we're going to use every day. That doesn't help in editorial and storytelling, but it does help in that one aspect of
And
it.
that's actually where I see where this is going to revolutionize things. I don't want to call you out, Mark, but with all the unscripted houses around, you're getting tens of thousands of hours of footage. I mean, the number I love to quote is like Deadliest Catch, right? 3 years ago, they had 30,000 hours of footage.
Oh my
okay,
God.
you log that, right? No, that's crazy. And also, people who log stuff are usually doing it in a subjective way, right? If we run AI to log all this footage, it's doing it objectively. It's identifying characters. It'll get to the point where it's identifying moods. And now you have more information with which to cull down that 30,000 hours into something that may be a better story that you may not have been able to do with the old way.
Allow me to challenge that assumption.
Please.
You said it categorizes it, it's objective. We don't want that. We want your subjective interest. We want to know what you think of this scene. We want to, I'm going to know who it is on camera. That's less important than what it is that they're doing. And that is a much taller order to fill for a computer than a human.
Right, to figure out a nuance in a mood.
But you're also
Or a
getting
look.
transcripts, right? Because if we're talking about objective, we're not talking
Not
about...
automatically. That's certainly low-hanging fruit for AI.
Right.
Yeah.
They're just not there yet.
So artificial intelligence, there's a lot of ways that it can help, but unfortunately it's going to replace a lot of jobs. Philip Hodges has done a lot of research and talking. He's not here, I don't think.
He'll have a new tool out at NAB about it. Lumberjack.
Yeah.
Seriously?
But yeah, back in 2008, I think it was, he had his, first cuts is what he called it, and it was basically a program that would string out a cut from all of your footage, and it was basically a rough cut, and then you could go in and fine tune it. But it had two limitations. One, it counted on a lot of metadata, and by metadata I'm saying metadata is data about data. So if you've got video, all of your descriptions, the time code, who's in that shot, what were they wearing, whatever, that's all metadata. So you need to have a lot of that to make his thing work. And then secondly, it was modeled on how he would edit something. So his partner who did all the programming, he'd go, well, if I got to that, I would make an edit like this. And so that's very limited.
And the material has to, the setups for the shots have to be very routine and standard. There can't be any
Helicopter
interpretive.
shots.
But that's
this is so limited. It's so
That's the
narrow-cast.
algorithm, though, that he was building on that. What is
so
happening now
depressing
is
and
that machine
homogeneous
learning
and-
is fine-tuning its own algorithms and constantly improving them. You feed in, 10,000 wedding videos, and all of a sudden it goes, oh, I understand how to cut a wedding video. And it's all we do. We learn from experience, from what we watch, and from our practice. We constantly refine our craft, but we're building up algorithms that we use.
That are personal.
Yeah, but
that
that's
have
still
to
an
do
algorithm.
with our own.
That's the bottom line.
Well,
so
it
AI is
is,
going to
but
do that, and it really comes down to the metadata. Once you have all of that metadata, you're talking about what would the human emotion be. You're talking about who's in the thing. But all of that is just metadata. When the computer gets to the point where it can get all that in to satisfy your requirements, that's the end of loggers. When it can do a basic string out, that's probably the end of some AEs or story editors, et cetera. And then, somewhere down the line, it gets to the point where you don't even need an editor anymore, but that's hopefully a long ways off. But yeah, as Philip put it, if you can teach somebody to do a job in 3 days to a week, they're going to be replaced by AI pretty soon. You might want to start finding something more creative that's more challenging.
And if you don't believe him, I mean, autonomous vehicles, they're happening.
Yes.
And it's probably a lot harder to teach a computer to drive a car in any circumstance than it is to edit. And there's been a lot of money, a lot of time and effort put into that.
Not that I'm trying to start a holy war, but that it's harder to drive than it is to edit? Because driving is based on a set of rules, whereas editing can break those rules.
Those set of rules, or there's always exceptions. And different circumstances, day, night, weather, you know, yeah, I mean, there's just a million sort of possibilities, and to try to get all that into it. We were talking, I forget who I was talking with the other day, about if the car has been programmed to save the occupant versus run over somebody on the street, what kind of car would you want to buy? The one that will save you or kill the pedestrian?
No, understood.
Anyway.
I think it's time to do a little vote here on who works on what.
And which NLE?
It's
a show of hands in the audience. Which NLEs are you working on?
First, I have Avid.
So media composer.
That's about 85%,
About
90%?
85%. Adobe Creative Suite. Look
Premiere.
at that. Look at that.
Half.
Okay, just out of curiosity, I'm sure you all use Photoshop. Who uses Premiere Pro?
Wow.
Okay, okay.
That's substantial.
Now, of you using Premiere Pro, how many are also using Avid? That's the same. Okay, so it's sort of a split. All right.
It's FCPX.
This is always fun.
Don't be
Philip's not here.
ashamed. Don't be ashamed.
It's only one this year, not two. Oh, wait, there's okay, two.
Don't be ashamed. No. Don't be ashamed.
And who's using Final Cut 7? Look, more than Final Cut 10. Look at this. Oh my God.
Any other NLEs? Apple for professional.
And Resolve for editorial.
Resolve for editorial.
For editorial.
And one in the back.
Anybody using Resolve for editorial in a shared project situation?
No.
Okay.
What about Premiere?
Anybody doing Premiere in shared project?
1, 2,
Couple.
3.
Oh, yeah?
Wow.
4.
Wow.
5.
Any others we didn't
down?
mention?
Thumb down on that? Yeah,
Because I know there's people watching on the stream, Vegas. The product formerly known as Vegas. Believe it or not, when I do speaking engagements around the country, I get people who come up to me and say, you never address the YouTube people, because the YouTubers were all cutting on Vegas. Okay.
All right.
All right.
How about Lightworks?
So I asked everyone, people out there in YouTube land.
Terry, what do you work on?
AlphaDogs is primarily a finishing house, so it depends on what our clients offlined on. That makes a difference on what we finish on. So we do Final Cut and Avid and Resolve and even Premiere. Premiere's great for short form. Premiere's great when you have to do a lot of, like if you're doing promos and stuff where you're a lot of graphics going in and out. I mean, nothing beats the Creative Suite integration. But when you get to like feature-length projects and it takes 20 minutes to open your project, it's just like, oh, God.
Getting better.
Kathryn?
Avid.
Avid.
Yeah.
We're primarily all Avid, but we do some casting projects where people are submitting, they'll be doing Skype interviews and things like that. And for that, Premiere or Final Cut is a great tool.
I've heard a myth. Can you dispel a myth?
Yeah, try.
I heard that Mark Raudonis is moving Bunim Murray completely to Resolve.
I've heard that too.
Not true. And I'll tell you this. I mean, we've already committed to Avid for the next year. So, no. We are certainly keeping a strong and close eye on it.
As any responsible business owner should.
Yeah. And I'm very impressed by what I've seen. But, I mean, there's this thing called inertia. And when you have as large of a group as we do, getting anyone to move anywhere is difficult. So, no.
And you have to measure it against the returns, you know. Okay, so if this is going to save you $50 a seat, is it worth all that pain? No. Yeah. It was a big thing when Final Cut Final Cut, the original Final Cut, not Final Cut 10, versus Media Composers. Media Composer, $150,000. Here's Final Cut at $1,000. That's,
Yeah, I call this the 10x improvement.
Is that's your factor?
Yeah, if it doesn't move the needle 10 times better than where you're at, it's not worth doing.
Yeah, it's not worth the
It's just
effort.
not worth it because inertia and resistance and all that. So even if it's promised to be 10x, by the time you're actually done, it's going to be like maybe 3 or 4, hopefully 5. So if any kind of change has to really be big enough and bold enough to be worth the effort.
Now, I'm wondering about post-production in the cloud. We did touch on it a little bit earlier, but is it happening? Is it happening more often?
I'm speaking hypothetically here, not necessarily what we're doing, but right now everything comes into, we have something called the sponge. It's basically a room where we have multiple Avids and everything comes in and is compressed and it's consolidated and it's transferred. That process could happen in the cloud. So if you're in a distant location, rather than send it via courier back to Los Angeles, why not just upload it to the cloud and let them do the transcoding and the grouping even and all those other sort of things? AI comes into play. So that is the way that the cloud is going to really amplify what we do right now internally. I'm not talking remote editing, things like that. I'm talking remote processing. And Amazon or any of those cloud services have far more servers than we could ever afford.
Right.
So they have the power to do that stuff in an instant that might take us overnight. And when the pipes going up and back are cheap enough, then that's going to absolutely happen.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's right now we're constrained by bandwidth in terms of trying to get fat files up for being rendered. But if we change that to VFX, where we're rendering frames and whatnot, it's not a continuous stream. So we're seeing a lot of VFX facilities who are rendering in the cloud. In terms of other post-production, we have things like Frame.io and other review and approve processes, which used to be lay off a VHS tape, burn a DVD. Now it's, hey, just export a proxy out of Avid or Premiere, send it up to the cloud, and people can comment there. Well, that's post-production in the cloud, right? That's the collaboration. So in that respect, yes. I think with remote editing, there obviously are a couple players out there who were saying, we've built video editing software in your web browser, and you can edit in that. But as we've seen, a lot of the folks here are stalwarts with what they edit with, and so moving to another solution really isn't something that they want to do.
Yeah, I guess I was also just thinking about the content being up in the cloud.
Yeah, that's security, and then there's latency, which is another issue. If it's there's enough latency just in the NLEs that we use now. Sending it somewhere.
And that's the point I love. How many people here game? Okay, how many of you are gamers?
You got a hardcore gamer here.
Well, I know you are. Okay, and how many times have you been laying on the button and been like pissed off because your character didn't move fast enough in the game, right? Because there was that lag, right? Okay, that's between you and the console sitting there. Now imagine you and the footage being 2,000 miles away. Yeah, that's one of the major challenges with remote editing is I need that immediate responsiveness. Since there's a lot of Avid editors are in here, not to crap on Avid, but how many of you ever edited with Adrenaline?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you hit the J, K, or L key, and you waited, and then it played.
Yeah.
Right? It would drive you nuts. Imagine doing that with footage 2,000 miles away. And that's why we're not quite there yet.
But you were also talking about the other aspects of your job that you're doing on the cloud too, interacting with the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's a very important part of the cloud.
So do you interact with like your assistant editors that way, or they're there with you physically more?
If I'm working on a really small film, the film that I did before the last film I did, my assistant was at home. And I was, alone in my editing room, which was very lonely and not a very good feeling. But it worked. It's not particularly safe. I don't think if you were doing a studio movie or a show for, Netflix or Amazon that they would enjoy you working that way.
Yeah, they're not going to let you.
But it certainly is a money-saving way to work on a small budget movie.
Steve Holfish did Dropbox collaboration on editing a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they had duplicates of the media, and then they just Dropbox the
Yeah,
cuts
we each have all the media, and then we just Dropbox at the end of every day. I just Dropbox my project.
Are these some of the differences between working with, say, a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, as opposed to a studio? And do you prefer it? I mean, do you have a preference?
A lot of it is budget related, so it's less dependent on who's paying the money as much as how much they're paying. So the lower the level, frankly, the more creative we have to become with these tools to make it work. If you have a great assist that happens to be in New York and is willing to, why not? And then maybe you get the advantage of time zone.
Wants to be at home with his baby, and his wife works.
Is your editor with you physically at all times when you're editing? Your assistant, I mean?
My assistant is with me unless he or she is not with me, but that would be a budgetary issue. It wouldn't be, I always would want my crew with me because I want, I have a team, and I want the participation of my assistants. I want their point of view and their sensibility and their eyes and their heart, and I just feel like the whole art of editing, storytelling it's a humanity. I mean, so really to tell the story in the best way, it needs to be handmade. And that means that maybe my assistant has just heard a song on the radio or was listening to something last night, or there's this beautiful interplay that happens when you actually get to engage people together. In fact, I'm working on a pilot now that I started last week, so I don't even know why I'm here. I should be in the cutting room working because, they work you to death. But before we started, the showrunner had already hired the composer and the sound supervisor and music editor. And so since, music is so important, it's a character, in whatever you're making, I thought that it would be really great if we all got together in the same room. And they were like, wow. So we all got together, and it was really kind of incredible because the composer was able to just pull from the cloud his music on my Avid, and so we could listen to it, and then the same with the music supervisor, and we sort of got together, and the project hadn't even been born yet. There wasn't even anything shot, but we all came together on the same page, and we sort of talked about how we could use music based upon the choices that the showrunner and the director had made in hiring each of us. And so that was great. That was something that you could only do together in a room. You could sort of simulate that on Slack or some kind of a chat situation, but not exactly.
Do you all have any ideas as what you do to combat this AI infiltration in the sense of people losing jobs? How do we reinvent ourselves in post-production? How do we keep ourselves viable?
I think that it's going to open up opportunities and things that we may not think of.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah. So, and if it helps me do my job easier, faster, better, cheaper, then that's great. And people that may be displaced, I say they have the opportunity to do other things. So for example, an assistant editor, a lot of the complaints are they're busy grouping or they're busy digitizing. They never are able to be in the cutting room. Well, if less of their time is spent with all those onerous technical tasks.
Yeah, you'll have less of them working then.
No.
Let's be honest.
No, the ones that are working will now be able to.
It's a different job.
Yeah,
it's a different job.
Yeah, but the guy signing the checks are not going to go, hey, this assistant editor just sits around half of the day in the edit room watching the other guy.
No.
Yeah, we're getting that's going.
We have things like ATSC 3.0. We have things like second screen. We have things like multi-outlet distribution where if they're not logging, then they're generating metadata for something else for some other outlet. So I don't see those jobs going away. I just see the exact job duties they may have shifted.
Who's doing that stuff now?
I'm sorry?
No, who's doing that now?
It doesn't exist because ATSC 3.0 is brand new.
I know, but
well, you're focusing on the end product, the finished product, and the viewing experience. I would love to see all that effort to the creative process, to the story process, where suddenly you can search for moods and people and thoughts and all that, and leverage that kind of metadata in the story creation process. From what I do, the bane of my existence is the mountain of media that we have to deal with.
Right.
Well, absolutely, and from an editorial standpoint, now that everything is shot digitally and we have multi-cameras, I mean, on any given day, I can have 8 hours of footage. I mean, how can one person really carefully examine 8 hours of footage and then also cut all that footage? It's just not humanly possible. So actually, on this show, and I've used this a couple of times in the past, actually not on movies, only on television, but I'm using the script sync, where you can line up your, and check takes back and forth. But I find actually that because every time you bring in a new tool, your work is different. So I notice that actually my work is more cutty. Like I'm, because how I'm interacting with my system is different, the choices that I'm making are different. So this is kind of interesting. The whole idea is that your system should work for you. Like you shouldn't even have to think about it. It's your brain, right, that you can just access instantly.
I don't want to sound hippy-dippy. I really don't.
Oh, no, I'm covering that.
Oh, thanks. But ever since editing has started, the roles of the editor and the roles of the team in the not only the production but post-production arena have had to morph. Right? It's
Absolutely.
been constantly evolving, and we can't put our shoes in wet cement and just say, well, I'm just going to keep doing the way I've been going.
I kind of
Things
love
have to evolve. So when AI does come in the cutting room, there's going to be other opportunities for other technology that those people have to learn and adapt. And if they don't learn and adapt, then they're going to be expelled and they'll have to go do something else.
So this is the question she was asking is, what should they be doing? The people who are going to be, let's say replaced the soonest, what should they be doing to future-proof themselves?
Well, I was going to say, can I be a jerk for a second?
Go for it.
Can I be a jerk?
Go for it. Go for it.
If there's a genuine concern about your job, logging, which can we agree is one of the kind of entry-level positions, okay? If there isn't a goal to move beyond that, right, to do more, then perhaps this industry isn't cut out for you, in which case be replaced, because someone else will be there to learn more and grow.
I don't even want to have anybody working near me, like on the same block, who isn't interested in developing and moving, evolving. I just don't want that. I don't think that's a kind of a dead energy, right?
When you first started editing, what were you editing on?
A cam, a flatbed.
So you were on film?
Yes, I loved it.
I think we all cut on film,
fun.
didn't we?
I thought it was really
I did
fun.
too.
I loved it.
I edited on a Moviola.
Yeah.
And so you've always, the learning curve and when the technology evolved. And
Oh God, it was really crazy. So I'm working on film and I cut this movie called Killing Zoe.
Oh yeah.
It was cool, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and so in those days, you could not even preview any visual effect. So you just had to imagine what it was with grease pencil. You would splice things together.
When you say
and
visual effect, you mean like dissolve.
Yeah.
I'm talking dissolves. I'm talking superimpositions and dissolves and, the things that we all take so for granted. And so, this whole film is through the point of view of a junkie. So, there are these crazy trips that happen during the course of the film, and we had no money, so it just had to be right the first time. And it was the second film that I had ever cut, and I was just scared to death. But you could actually sit with that. You could go to the lab and actually watch them line up the dissolve and tweak it there in terms of density and length and all of that. So
It was like an hour process.
it was,
10-frame dissolve.
but so incredibly handmade. So then this same director got another project, and we were going to do it in France, and he wanted to cut on the Media Composer, and there had yet to have been a film cut on the Media Composer, only commercials. So I was like, well, I really need to have an assistant or somebody that knows how to do this. And they're like, don't worry, we've got a fabulous assistant for you. And so I arrive in Cannes in the dead of winter, and there's no assistant there. And I'm in a room with an Avid, because the assistant was like the nephew of a producer. And he actually was in an ashram somewhere, and his film experience was shooting videos of the meditation teacher. And so while I was waiting for him to come and assist me on this film for HBO, I had to call Avid. And so I called tech support at Avid.
How long did you wait on hold?
At least it was in the United States.
That's how I learned.
France.
That's how I learned Avid, is waiting on hold.
Literally.
Reading the book.
Literally. I spent probably, I don't know, 5 hours on the phone with Avid, and they, walked me through everything. And then I hung up, and then it was just free fall. And I just taught myself, and that was that. But it's intuitive. And also fear. Fear is amazing. Like when you're just absolutely scared to death, it's amazing. Like concentration and focus, and yeah.
Mark, I'm just wondering how the reality show industry has changed lately, and
Over the years,
Yeah.
or in the last 6 months?
last 6 months. If it's the last 6 months, yeah, I'd like to know.
The pendulum swings from a programming point of view between popular and less popular. And for a while there, reality was on a tremendous roll. There were more reality shows every day. There were seeing networks springing up that were all reality all the time. So I think the market has become a bit saturated, a bit tired, and to be honest, a lot of the shows were very derivative. There wasn't any new ideas or new concepts, new shows coming out. So it was like the second version of this, and this. So the audiences have become a little bit less enamored with the genre. So that is probably where we are right now, is everyone's looking for the next greatest big thing, but over the last 10, 15 years, there's been so many ideas and so many permutations of reality shows, it's really hard to get attention, to do something that's different, that stands out, that you haven't seen before, or isn't labeled as fake. And that's my pet peeve. I will look you in the eye and tell you, the shows that Bunim does, the Real World Challenge, things like that, we may be guilty of casting for controversy, but once those people are on the show, what they say and do is real. We do not tell them to do anything. We do not put words in their mouth. That's not the case for every other company or every other show that's out there. So we're tarred with that same brush of, oh, it's fake, and it just drives me nuts when I hear that. So how has it changed? I think we've become a bit overextended as a genre. And audiences have become more fragmented. There's more options. We talked about other outlets, things like that. And therefore, because of that, the budgets are coming down. So it's kind of a tough sort of market to be in at the moment.
At this point, we're to the break of the 15th annual Pre-NAB Editors Lounge.